He was born Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark in 1921 on the Greek island of Corfu. His mother was Princess Alice of Battenberg, which made Philip a great-great-grandchild of Queen Victoria, just like his future wife. But Philip and his family were forced to flee Greece after a coup, and he ended up at Gordonston School in Scotland, where the disciplines of sport and achievement were to shape his future. Because from Gordonston, he went to the Royal Navy in 1939 as a cadet.
His Majesty walking down the ranks of the cadets.
He was at Britannia Royal Naval College in Dartmouth before the war. At the back here, in the centre of the screen, is the 18-year-old Philip. He'd been asked to entertain the King's daughters during a royal visit. The eldest daughter, Elizabeth, is sitting along from her parents, just 13 at the time. Afterwards, they played croquet in the gardens outside. It was clear Elizabeth had taken a shine to Philip in Dartmouth that afternoon. But whatever might have started then would have to wait. World War II was about to take Philip far away. With the Navy, he fought the Italians and then the Japanese. But the young princess exchanged letters with Philip throughout the war years, which allowed them, when peace finally came, to pick up their romance.
It's easy to see the radiant happiness of the princess.
And in 1947, they got engaged.
As she and her very good-looking husband-to-be posed for the cameras in the palace.
And the wedding, when it came later that year, was to light up a post-war Britain still mired in bomb damage and rations. He had renounced his Greek title, and the king made him the Duke of Edinburgh.
Now the Duke of Edinburgh takes a fatherly hand, his technique being no better and no worse than most fathers.
Prince Charles was the first of the couple's 4 children, a future king. And the Duke of Edinburgh was promoted to commander. He took charge of his own ship, HMS Magpie, in Malta. So at the beginning of the 1950s, the young couple would lead a life about as close to normal as it ever got.
Here, the royal pair look out over the harbour and points of interest in Valletta.
But as the Duke recalled in later years, he had to abandon the career he loved so much with the sudden death of his father-in-law. His wife had become queen. So at her coronation the following year, an event he insisted should be televised for the world to see, the Duke took an oath to serve his wife, the Queen, for the rest of his life. He knelt before her and swore to be her loyal follower.
I, Philip, will become your liege man of life and limb, and of earthly worship. In faith and truth I will bear unto you, to live and die, against all manner of folk, so help me God.
Rising, he kisses the Queen's cheek and touches the Queen's crown, in token of his readiness to help her bear its burden.
His wife was head of state, but what would this young man, the Queen's consort, do now?
Here's Dr. Kurt Hahn, lately headmaster of Gordonston School, where the Duke was once a pupil.
The answer came, in part, from the Duke's former headmaster, Dr. Kurt Hahn. In 1956, they channeled their shared interest in sport and voluntary service to launch the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme.
These are the boys of Dunstable Grammar School out on fire practice, ably assisted by the local fire brigade.
The main purpose of the scheme is to help boys to find activities which will give them pleasure and satisfaction, perhaps for the rest of their lives.
1,000 completed the award in its first year. More than 3 million 14 to 24-year-olds have achieved their D of E since then.
The Duke plays at back. He's easy to recognise in the match with number 4 on the back of his shirt and wearing a black cap.
And he channeled that passion for sport into his own life. An accomplished polo player, only retiring reluctantly in 1971. And at the age of 50, he turned his attention to carriage driving, which he kept at even when the sport became sometimes a little challenging.
Oh, you idiot!
And at others, a little dangerous. But even when he had been thrown to the ground, he was straight back in the carriage, his desire to win overcoming everything else. But there was also a passion for conservation. He was president of the Worldwide Fund for Nature from 1961, years before the world's attention turned to the environment.
And they've got nostrils on the end there.
Yes.
Prince Philip and his eldest son did share a passion for the outdoors, but often they had a different outlook on life. One a pragmatist, the other a thinker. A difference best articulated by Philip loving everything about Gordonston School, but Charles never quite fitting in there. At the time of the wedding and latterly the breakup of Charles and Diana's marriage, the Duke was enormously supportive of Diana. He was once, like her, the royal outsider. But his focus turned to his grandsons William and Harry when Diana's life was cut short by that car crash in Paris. This was a moment when the Duke of Edinburgh had to support his wife at what became a very dangerous time for the monarchy. But later that year, when the Queen and Duke celebrated their golden wedding anniversary, she paid him a personal and rare public tribute.
All too often, I fear Prince Philip has had to listen to me speaking. He is someone who doesn't take easily to compliments, but he has quite simply been my strength and stay all these years.
And it was also an anniversary for reflecting on how their long and successful partnership had endured.
I think that the main lesson that we've learned is that tolerance is the one essential ingredient of any happy marriage. And you can take it from me that the Queen has the quality of tolerance and abundance.
Tolerance the Queen did sometimes need to cope with her husband's sense of humour.
Can you get Radio 3 on it?
But Prince Philip's wit and sharp tongue sometimes created headlines which the palace could have done without. At age 90 here, he looked not to have a care in the world. But the hours spent on the River Thames for the Queen's Diamond Jubilee would leave him in hospital with a bladder infection. And there followed rare moments when the Duke was not by the Queen's side. His official diary did not go on, and when he announced his retirement from royal duties, Prince Philip did what he does best. He made a joke. This one was about his own advancing years.
But I'm sorry to hear you standing down. I'll stand up much.
And so it was just a few months later that the Duke bid farewell. On a wet August day in the forecourt of Buckingham Palace, he saluted the Royal Marines, of which he was the Captain General, and at 96, he completed his final official engagement. Retirement was mostly spent away from the cameras and mostly at Sandringham, which was where he had a car crash, one he escaped from with no injuries, remarkably, even at 97. 2 others were injured though, and it forced the Duke to surrender his driving licence, and with it, a bit of the independence he greatly valued. There were no more official engagements, but neither retirement nor a recent hip operation were good enough reasons to miss a big royal wedding. He watched his grandson Prince Harry marry Meghan Markle in 2018. And he also met the couple's son Archie when he was born a year later. It led to this photograph, one which showed just how much the royal family had changed since he joined it in 1947. But as his granddaughter-in-law Meghan would later tell Oprah Winfrey after she left the family, she thought it hadn't changed enough. During the coronavirus lockdown, Prince Philip was moved to Windsor Castle, where this picture was taken for his 99th birthday, and another for the 73rd anniversary of his marriage to the Queen. They both isolated at Windsor with a small number of staff to limit the risk of infection. And it was during that year he stepped out in public momentarily to hand over his military role with the Rifles Regiment to the Duchess of Cornwall. 99 years old and still making jokes. This one was about fitness.
Oh, keep it up, sir.
As he had done with people for so many years. He then headed back inside to resume his retirement behind closed doors. But of all the stays he had endured in hospital in his later years, 2021 would see the longest of them all. Prince Philip was discharged 4 weeks after first arriving and had a sudden visit one Saturday afternoon from his eldest son. The Duke of Edinburgh was treated for both an infection and heart surgery in that time. If Queen Elizabeth's reign is to be judged a success, it will be in no small part because of the man she married. In his adopted country, Prince Philip became the joint author of the Second Elizabethan era. She is the longest-serving monarch in British history, but at her side throughout was the longest-serving consort.